Greetings. About a week ago, I posted a video on how to add joints to an existing figure, more specifically a prop like a navel piercing. And this video is going to be sort of a advanced version of that, where we're going to take two props, combine them into a single prop, and then again put bones in it so that it can have the various segments of it moved independently. And in this case, what we're going to be using as the desired navel piercing is this Gothic earring prop that you see here. And I'm doing this because I'm actually kit bashing a character's outfit together, and I'm using these earrings, and I was like, these would be nice to also have as a navel piercing. But if you look, they have this hook on them that is not really appropriate for an attachment to the navel. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this navel piercing instead, which has a nice piercing and stud at the bottom of it. And obviously we're going to have to get rid of the spiral chain. And I have Genesis 3 female in here for the moment, just as a way to get a sort of visual on perspective on size. And so what we're going to do with this earring is we're going to bring it down next to this piercing. So it's going to be about -5, -50, 15. Actually, that should be 0. So with it down here, we can see it's quite a bit bigger than that existing one. And through a little bit of prior experimentation, I found that if we do around 55, then it's kind of about the right size. So why don't we go ahead and hide Genesis for the moment, just to clean things up or give less clutter. Now, looking at this navel, or the earring rather, you might think, well, what we'll want to do is make each of these separate dangles be their own bone. And I had actually tried that, spent like 2.5 hours doing so. The problem is that up in here, the creator of this earring, there's geometry problems where some of these rings actually have their vertexes welded to multiple rings, or they share a vertex between the different rings. And so try as you might, without going out to an external editing tool to fix that, there's no way to make these individual links be fully separate up here where they're sort of all lying on top of each other. So we're going to end up making all of these chains be one bone. We're going to make the heart and these rings another bone, and then we're going to take this and the little wire bit, and we're going to make that be a swivel joint that sticks into this ball so that we can get rid of this ball on the top and the hook. And so that's what our game plan is. So to get started, we need to convert both of these into triax figures, just like we did in the other videos. So edit, rigging, convert prop to figure, triax, and we'll fix the name to get rid of that figure underscore that it sticks in. And then on this one, we're going to also say edit, rigging, convert to figure, triax, take out the figure underscore name. And you'll note that it popped our figure back up top. And it should also have reset. Yeah, so like scale is also back to 100. That's okay. But we can come up here. Actually, before we start editing geometry, the other thing we need to do is this spiral belly ring has some morphs in it that affect the geometry that we're going to get rid of. So we need to delete these morphs. Delete, 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 and then turn off edit mode in properties. And then we're going to call this thing the SV Gothic Navel Piercing 03. Now, changing the scene name over here doesn't change the internal identifier that Studio uses for every object. And we need to fix that. It's kind of important. If I ever wanted to take this spiral belly ring and fix it so that it was a multi-segment joint or multi-jointed prop, when you go to save the geometry, when you do the figure save asset, Studio names the geometry file based on that internal name. And so putting them all in the quote-unquote navel piercings product that I have defined means that you'd end up overwriting the geometry, and obviously we don't want that. So what we're going to do, we have the piercing selected. We're going to come up here, object, scene identification, and we're going to replace that with SV Gothic Navel Piercing 03. And we can also say it's a prop for the waist. Accept. And if we go back in there and we look again, we can see that this internal scene ID, which is a non-editable field, Studio has actually gone and updated that for us, which is what we need. And so why don't we save that off now? So file, save as, support asset, figure prop. We're going to save it as this SV Gothic Navel. Yes, replace. And in here, again, we need to make that product match. And then the rest of this is okay, so we say accept. And so now we're ready to start editing. And the first thing we're going to do on this guy is we're going to get rid of all the stuff down below. So if we select here, 1, 2, 3, I'm control clicking for these. And zoom in a bit. Control click. Geometry selection, select connected. And we'll get the little barb sticking out there in a moment. But if we then say geometry hide selected, and then we say editing, delete hidden, and we say yes, poof, they're gone. And now we want to get rid of that little stub that's sticking out there. And if we zoom in, we can see that actually it's a little there. This thing actually is a pipe that goes all the way up the inside. And it's actually multiple segments. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically select the bottom pieces of it. If Studio will cooperate on the viewport. And make sure, no. So here we go with the, every now and then Studio loses there. Bring that back. Zoom in a bit more. Click, control click, control click. Control click. And if we get that, probably good enough. We zoom in a tad bit more. Not cooperating, but if we come down here, I believe it's the bead. Yeah, we can hide the bead. And we'll say selection, grow, and that should have basically gotten us. Well, it didn't quite, because you can see that there's this piece there that it still has. So we'll say shrink, and then we'll try to highlight there. Grow. You can do grow once more. And we're looking pretty good. So we'll turn the bead back on. And then we will say, again, hide selected. And then editing, delete hidden. Yes, gone. And so now this piece is basically ready. And then if we come up to the earrings, and we zoom in. Now, one of the problems is if we just pick this and we say select connected, you can see it goes all the way down and gets us in here. But and if we come here, let's see, the metal ball is that top bit, right? So by doing that, what we want is we want to keep a bit of this post. We're actually going to get rid of the metal ball, but we're going to keep it hidden for the moment. We're going to say mode marquee. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag select while holding Alt. And what that's going to do is that deselected. And now maybe say shrink selected one time. Well, no, we got to undo that. Control Z. And now we'll turn the ball back on and we'll click the little plus here to add the ball to the selection. We will see hide selected, and that's looking okay. Actually, did we get part of the selection visibility unhide? Oops. Show all. So looks like no, that the little springy thing just naturally ends there. So visibility is, well, we lost our there. So visibility hide, and actually show all because we need to add the ball. Edit, undo, well, edit, redo, add the ball, visibility, hide selected, good, editing, delete hidden, yes. All right. So that is ready from a geometry perspective as well. Although one last bit, it currently has all these different face groups. These don't really do anything for us. So what we're going to do is we're still in marquee. Yep. So we're going to drag select on that, and we're going to get all of it. We can see that because all these change to minuses as well. And we're going to make a new face group out of this, and we're going to call it swivel, because that's going to end up being the first joint in this thing later on. And then the rest of these face groups you can remove. So the next thing we need to do is join these two guys together. And the way we do that is if we're in scene here and we have the earrings selected at the moment, and we're going to say parameters, and we're going to fit it to the piercing object. And it jumped down there, which is fine. And then if we, well, we're already in the geometry editor, so we go to the geometry editor, we make sure we have the navel piercing selected. And in the geometry editor, well, I'm going to rename abdomen to navel piercing. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say editing, and I'm going to say merge fitted figure geometry. It says, are you sure? Yes. And our guy went back up here, and if you look in here, you can see we have the imported face group with name, well, it's got the prefix for the object and swivel, and then we've got all the material groups for that object. And we still have this other entry here, which we don't need anymore, so I'm going to delete that. And so now we have this navel piercing, and then up here we have the original, or the earring, and we need to bring the earring down so it's like part of the piercing. And so what we're going to do is go into the joint editor, and I'm going to first actually, because I hate that hip name, I'm going to say edit, rename bone, and I'm going to call this the navel piercing. Accept. And now what I need to do is I need to add that swivel bone under that. So again, under tools, like from the previous video, we say create child bone, and we're going to call it swivel. And we need the YXZ, and we say accept. And so right now that bone is down here with the navel piercing, and we need to bring it up to where this guy is. So we're going to bring up the Y point, kind of about right, and Z needs to go back. So we're in kind of the right ballpark area. Let's zoom in some. And we need to come over Come forward. Down a bit. Forward a bit. Down a tiny bit again as well. And then there, that's good enough. And so we're at minus 1.37, minus 1.37. This is 7.06, 7.06, and we'll say 162.5. So we're up here. And we don't actually really need to worry about positioning this bone correctly, because it's going to be the weight map that affects us, right? So if we go and we click on the swivel, and then we go to the node weight map brush. I showed this in the previous video, and so then you go weight editing and you say fill by bone selection groups. Now if we go to parameters and we say X rotate 5, we can see that this thing is doing the movements that we expect. So now if we go back to the piercing part, so down here, we'll zoom out a little bit, and on the swivel we'll bring it back down. So this should be minus 6, minus 50, I think 15, right? And then we said we wanted scale 55. So probably a little, yeah. 14, we need to bring the height down. We want to make it look like the little springy thing is coming out of the bottom of this ball. So, what about 51.8? How about 8.5? Okay, and then this. That's looking pretty good, and we're still a little bit in front of it. 7.5, too much. Oop. .6, nope. About 5.07 or 08. .075. Now, the other thing that we have to do is, you can see that because this was an earring, it comes in and it's a little oriented with a twist to it, right? Well, we don't want that for the navel piercing. So on the wide rotate, I think I figured that this was about -18 before, yeah. So what we have got, well, now it looks like we need to come to the left a little bit more. Right. That is looking pretty good. So now comes sort of the next little magic trick, and that is that we want Studio to basically consider that that navel piercing or the earring is always supposed to be in that location without having to have all these wild corrections. So the way to do that is if we go back to the joint editor and we have the swivel selected, what we're going to do is we're going to say edit bake joint rotations. You can see all this stuff went bent to black. And if we look at and we say navel piercing and we say rotate, and it's like, well, wait a minute, where did it go? I'll try doing just, well, you can see it's rotating not how we expect. And that's because the bake put all of the center and endpoints down at world origin. So now we need to set up our bones for real. And before we do that, we'll also get our other face group regions set up so that we have them ready for the bones. So we will go to the geometry editor. And what we've got right now is navel piercing, and I'm going to edit out that WG. And so we have the swivel. So the navel piercing's the top, the swivel has everything down, right? Well, so what we want now is we want to make this ring, this ring, this ring, this. And we're going to say geometry selection, select connected. And we got everything that we want. So we're going to assign this to a new face group. And we are going to call this the heart. And then if we come down here, we can do marquee selection. We're going to grab all of that. Then come in here real close and say select connected. And that looks good, so we will create one last face group and we'll call those the dangles, for lack of a better word. And so now, clear. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the swivel. I'm going to say, well, actually, as I said, it reset all the joints, right? So if we look at the navel piercing, even this one, the base had its joints reset. So we need to fix it as well. And I think it's around 145. That's too high up. 140. Still above us, but probably... Come forward a bit. These don't have to be totally precise, but helps to have them in at least sort of the general area, because the subsequent bones are going to start where these ones end. So that looks okay. So bring 10.66. It's 112. And what we want to do is we're going to make that ball be the top of the swivel. So for the end point, we're going to bring it forward so that we're lined up about with the top of the ball. And we need to come down a bit. Well, actually, what we're going to not do is not so much the top of the ball, because the pivot, we want the ball to sort of like pivot in its center, right? So if we make this be more lined up in the center of the ball, that'll be the right starting point for this. We could say, what, 11.69. So those are not too bad. And if we check the front, from an X perspective, we're about lined up as well. So we're going to say align node. And Studio calculates that for us. And so now, if we go to parameters and we say rotate on X, or we say rotate on Y, actually Y, and all right, so what I said about trying to make it be the start of the next bone is actually more to help, but as you can see, the problem we have here is that when we rotate on Y, it's not really doing what you expect for a Y rotation. So if we go back here and we say 10.66, so it's down like that, and then we'll clear that. So now, if we rotate on Y, does what you expect. If we rotate on Z, does what you expect. Rotate on X, does what you expect. And so now let's make the joint for the swivel, or correct the joint for the swivel. Now what we can do as a shortcut is we can say snap center, and that moved the center to the end point of the previous bone. And so now, of course it helps to be removing the right one. We can move this forward. And I think it was 11.69 that we had. So that's looking pretty good. And then we're gonna bring the bottom up. This will be like, well, we'll clear out that, 111.1, so it should be right up below it. And what we want to do is sort of try to align it with the center of the top of this ring that's going to be part of the next joint. So we're going to bring this down. 110.5. Should really come forward just a tiny bit. 11.7. Maybe 0.01. Rather 0.05. 005. So that's looking fairly decent. And if we go to the node and we do our weight editing fill parameters, if we do X. Oh, so our swivel needs to pick up a little bit of the geometry from the base navel piercing. We didn't do that when we're editing the geometry, so we'll come back here and we'll bring smart key, okay. So I'm gonna drag select over that, and then I'm gonna say select connected, assign to face group swivel. Then we go back to the weight map brush and we say weight editing fill. And then if we go back to parameters and we do X, it is moving like we expect. If we do Y, it's all right. If we do Z, we're all right. So now we want to make a new bone for the heart. So we're going to say joint editor. This is similar to what we did in the last video. We're going to say create child bone. heart. Well, started filling it in for us. YXZ, okay. And then this is going to be the heart selection group. Say node weight map, and we'll do our editing fill bone. We'll go back to the joint editor. So the top is where we want it. But we need to move the bottom down. So and again, we're trying to line it up with roughly where the swivel for the chains is based. And maybe forward just a tad. All right, so if we check parameters and we do X, heart is doing what we expect. If we do Y, it turns, and if we do Z, it goes side to side. So one last bone to do, and that is the dangly chains. So we have the heart selected. We're going to again say create child bone, and we're going to call this the dangles. Y is the X, accept, and bone selection is dangles. And then same kind of deal, we're going to move this down, and again, because this is our last bone in the hierarchy, we don't really need it to be perfect, so we'll leave it at that. Or we'll, how about if we round it to a nice round number. And we go and we do our node weight map, and we say editing fill. And so now if we go parameters on here, we get ba-da-dum-ba-dum. If we do Y rotate, that works. And if we do Z rotate, ba-dum-ba-dum. So we're in pretty good shape. Zoom out a bit. And one other thing we'll do is if we go to this figure and we go here, and we go to the, nope, go to the joint editor, we're going to say memorize figure rigging. What that did is it means that now all the settings that we've made for all the various joints, these are what it thinks are the default values, so that their natural position, if you will. So if somebody starts wanting to move them themselves, they can do so, and they always know where to revert to. And I'm going to save this again just for good measure. So here, save, yes, accept. And now I'm going to go back to the geometry editor because we have all these nasty surface names that were generated as a result of the merge. And so let's clean that up a bit. And so what we can do is we can select that and we will say Gothic. Copy that. V dangle caps. Control V dangle gems. And this, just call the back. Gothic heart. Gothic, whoops. Okay, Gothic link. Metal rings. Metal wrap. Small metal rings, or actually metal rings, small. And so that has fixed up the names. I got an extra space in here. And the rest of them look all right. And the other thing now is I'm going to say edit, convert to sub D, because we could see there was faceting in this mesh resolution. Bump that up by 1. And we can say file, save as, support asset, figure prop, rewrite, accept. And so now the one thing that you might, well, there's a couple of things. A, you might play games with, or not play games, but you might want to adjust the material settings for all the different surfaces so that they have suitable defaults, like maybe do something to try to make, copy the chains to be the navel piercing so it's consistent metal type, etc. I leave that as an exercise for a future video. The other thing you can do is this is turned back on the default Genesis 3. So we could adjust this a tad. Minus 0.5, how about that? And minus 0.25. And we'll put like 10 degrees of X on it, maybe 15 degrees of X. And this minus 0.4, about 3. This 1.5. So that's not too bad. Let's see. It looks it's about centered X1 on the X. And then, so that one we don't need to change. The swivel, we'll bring the swivel back out so that it's not in the abdomen. Minus 12, Probably okay. And then for the heart, -10 is not enough. -15. And actually we can see maybe we need to bring the swivel out some or more, because then the dangles, 10, too much, 8, 5, still a little too much, 4, so actually they are about right as is. Now, did I actually put Y into one of these? Swivel looks like it needs to go. So that's not too bad, is it? It looks like maybe the heart could do a little Z swing as well. So voila. So the thing you can do now is you can come up here and you can say edit figure, memorize figure, and that now has made all of the different rotations that we dialed in. See, like the 6 is now gray, it's no longer highlighted as edited. So if we turn off Genesis, and we line that up for a shot, we can again once more say save as support asset. Nope, not scene asset, sorry. Save as support asset figure prop. Save, yes. Save. And so if somebody wants to get it back to just all zeros, they can always select the figure and they can say 0 figure and it's back to here, right? Or they can say restore selected item. Well, if we edit figure, restore figure, we get it back to the bends that we just set up. And it would have been nice to be able to do the separate chains, because as you can see, a couple of the chains stick a little forward from that one base one. So if you're trying to make them all lie tight against the abdomen, can't really do that. I suppose if you wanted, what you could do is maybe from around here on down, you could make them pivot individually, but that's probably not going to look good, especially if you do exit, because then it's going to be down and then a kink out to the side, which would not be the way the chains would behave under gravity normally. So at any rate, I hope that this was useful to prove that this is working. I'm going to delete this. Go to content library props, and then the navel piercings. So here is this crisscross is another example of where I combined two props into one. But if we load up the navel piercing, we see it loaded with that pose, and we can say edit figure 0 eyes or edit figure restore, and we're in business, right? And obviously, since it's a regular prop, you can use it for any figure you want, not just Genesis 3F, but any of them, Victoria, whatever, doesn't matter. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know. Like I say, I think the biggest trick is figuring out how to use the bake joint rotations to move the one shape to line up with the other shape, as well as to scale and rotate it and so forth, so that becomes its base shape. And then you just have to redo all the joints after that, and it's pretty straightforward. Once again, thank you. Cheers.